page 128. We begin with the words Bo'i Kala, which you don't need to look at your books for. Bo'i Kala, 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 Bo'i Kala. At the bottom of the page. Hachamame Rosh Ha'ila Nistalka Bo'u v'nei likrat Shabbat Hamalka. Hachamame Rosh Ha'ila Nistalka Bo'u v'nei likrat Shabbat Hamalka. Bo'ui Kala, Bo'ui Kala, Bo'ui Kala, Bo'ui Kala. Keep singing that. Bo'ui Hamame Rosh Ha'ila Nistalka Bo'u v'nei likrat Shabbat Hamalka. Hachamame Rosh Ha'ila Nistalka Bo'u v'nei likrat Shabbat Hamalka. Bo'ui Kala, Bo'ui Kala, Bo'ui Kala, Bo'ui Kala.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Good evening, good Shabbos. Welcome to Congregation Dor Tamid and our Friday evening Kabbalat Shabbat worship service. It is a pleasure to be with all of you here this evening, as well as those of you joining us online through our virtual community. I'm Rabbi Jordan Ottenstein, joined on the bima, as always, by our cantorial soloist, Mike Zuspin. And it is just a joy to be with all of you as we welcome in this Shabbat, this day that we are given each week as an opportunity to take a step back and rest and reflect, to renew ourselves and our souls. And this week, an opportunity to, along with all of the other reasons we come together on Shabbat, to mourn together, to comfort one another, to say prayers for those who are in need of healing, and to celebrate this day of rest, we also come together to celebrate a simcha, not just in the lives of some of you, but in the life of Congregation Dor Tamid, as tomorrow morning during our 10:30 a.m. worship service, 8 of our adult members will, after having spent the last almost year studying week after week Hebrew and cantillation and liturgy, will lead us in prayer and be called to the Torah as adult B'nai Mitzvah for the first time. So we really are just in joy to be on this Shabbat after a lot of time working together with our B'nai Mitzvah students, and a joy to be with all of you. We begin our Shabbat services first by making sure that our cell phones and other electronic devices are turned off and away, by turning to page 128 as we speak of the love that Shabbat brings, singing together the words of Yidid Nefesh.
Yidid Nefesh Harachaman, Yidid Nefesh Harachaman, Meshochadecha El Ritzonecha, Meshochadecha, Ya la 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 El Ritzonecha. Yavuz Avecha Kemoya Ishtach
As we do each week, we begin Shabbat by bringing more light into creation. And to kindle our Sabbath lights tonight, I'm going to invite our 7 B'nai Mitzvah students who are with us this evening to come to the Bima to light our Sabbath lights as we all turn to page 121.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat.
We turn now in our prayer books to page 130 as we begin our service of Kabbalat Shabbat, our service of welcoming in the Sabbath, with Psalm 95, Lechu Neranena.
Lechu neranena l'Adonai, Nariya letzor yishenu, Nekahat ma'afana b'todah, Mizmirot Nariya lo. Page 131.
Turn to page Psalm 29 on page 136. Mizmor LeDavid. Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim. Havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz. Havu l'Adonai kavod shemo. Ishtachavu l'Adonai b'hadrat kodesh. Together, a psalm of David. Ascribe to Adonai, O divine beings. Ascribe to Adonai glory and strength. Ascribe to Adonai the glory of God's name. Bow down to Adonai, majestic in holiness. The voice of Adonai is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. Adonai over the mighty waters. The voice of Adonai is power. The voice of Adonai is majesty. The voice of Adonai breaks cedars. Kol Adonai hotzev lahavot esh. The voice of Adonai kindles flames of fire. The voice of Adonai convulses the wilderness. Adonai convulses the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of Adonai causes hinds to calf and strips forest bare. While in God's temple all say glory. Adonai sat enthroned at the flood. Adonai sits enthroned sovereign forever. Adonai oz le'amo yitain. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May Adonai grant strength to God's people, and may Adonai bestow on God's people well-being. We turn now to page 138 as we welcome in the Sabbath bride with the singing of L'chadodi. We will sing together verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, and when we reach the 9th verse, we rise and face the door of the sanctuary, welcoming in the Shabbat Hamalka, the Sabbath queen, when she enters our presence.
L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor v'dibor echad, Kishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet b'litila. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor ha'beracha. Merosh mikedem nisucha, sof ma'aseh b'machsheva tehila. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, iva orech u'mi uri shir daberi, kevod Adonai alayik nigla. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'v'tzom ola, toch emunei am segula. Boi kala, boi kala. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
We turn to the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irute ve'yamlich malchute. V'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayete kol beit Yisrael. Bagala u'vizman kariv ve'immeru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarach, le'alam u'l'al me'al maya, yitbarach, ve'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, ve'yitadar, ve'yitaleh, ve'yitalal, shemei de kudisha berichu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata na'amiran be'alma ve'immeru. Amen. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruchu et Adonai, Am Mevorach. Baruch Adonai, Am Mevorach, Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam va'ed. Yalalai, lai, lai, 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 yalalai, lai, lai. Am I awake? Am I prepared?
Please be seated as we continue on page 149. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim.
Ahavat olam Bet Yisrael Amecha ata Amcha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu lemadeta, Otanu lemadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shofenu, V'tumenu na'asiyach b'chukecha, V'nismach b'divrei Toratcha, Uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki ein chayenu le'orech yameinu uvahem nehye yomam v'layla nehye yomam v'layla v'ahavatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'avta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadivarim ha'ele Asher Anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibartam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderech u'v'shokbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yatecha Vehayu letotafot bein einecha וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
We continue now responsively on page 157. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed.
מי כמוך מעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, עושה פלא, מי כמוך מעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. Who is like you? Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? When Moses and the children crossed the sea, they sang to you with songs of joy. Who is like you, Adonai? Mi chamocha ma'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, oseh felet, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hashivenu Leshalom, Ve'ha'amidenu Shomrenu Lechayim, Ufros Aleinu Zokat Shlomecha, Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu, Hashivenu Leshalom. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm.
We turn now to page 162 as we turn to these words from Torah, words that remind us as we sing them each and every week that this day of Shabbat, when guarded, when observed, when protected, when marked, will not only renew us but renew our souls.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam Berit olam Beni uven v'nei Yisrael oti leolam Sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz ubayom hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbat vayinaf Shabbat vayinaf V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam Berit olam Beni uven b'nei Yisrael oti leolam Oti leolam Oti leolam. I know they need to hear it, just one little snippet, a little taste, a little taste. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. And if you want to sing the rest of it, come tomorrow.
Yes. So, Micah, Ella, we promise, tomorrow morning we'll do the whole one, the whole song. But now we turn to page 164 as we rise for the tefillah. We sing the opening psalm together, and then I invite you to continue silently through page 181, using the words on the page or the words in your hearts. And when you finish, please be seated, and we will conclude our tefillah with a prayer for peace.
Yalla lai lai lai, 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 yalla lai lai lai. Adonai sifatai tikach Ufi agidei latecha Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Yalla lai lai lai, yalla lai lai lai, yalla lai lai lai. Yalla lai lai lai. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו.
Earlier this week, as I was preparing for tonight's service, I looked back in my files hoping to find an appropriate quote or story to begin my talk this evening. And as I was looking, I noticed a very sad pattern. Having been ordained in late spring of 2014, I have in my rabbinic files sermons from February of 2015, 17, 19, and 21 about anti-Semitism, as well as one from January of 22 following the hostage situation in Colleyville, Texas. And this is also in addition to times that I've spoken about the topic on the high holidays, as well as following the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. I have to say, tired of it. Tired of having to speak about this. And I'm sure many of you are tired of hearing about it. But it's important. It's important to call out anti-Semitism when we see it and work to eradicate it. By now, I'm sure many of you have heard of the flyers that were distributed in Dunwoody and Sandy Springs last week, proclaiming that Jews engage in a disgusting act associated with the ceremony of Brit Milah. Additionally, I'm also sure that many of you heard of the Molotov cocktail thrown at a synagogue in New Jersey within the last weeks. In the past couple of days, Joe Rogan has made the news by utilizing one of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes about Jews and our supposed love of money. This is in addition to all of the news we've heard in the past months about Kyrie Irving and Kanye. And anyone who works with our students on a regular basis will hear from a number of them about the anti-Semitic comments made often by their classmates in our local schools. Unfortunately and tragically, the scourge of anti-Semitism keeps appearing week after week, month after month, and year after year. The Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, has stated that 2021 was the highest year on record for anti-Semitic violence, harassment, and vandalism nationally. And it expects that once fully tabulated, the 2022 numbers will be tragically similar. But first of all, how do we define anti-Semitism? One of the best explanations I have heard comes from my teacher, Dr. Michael Meyer, the professor emeritus of Jewish history at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, who says that anti-Semitism is simply the hatred of Jews as Jews. In other words, this evil of anti-Semitism is the hatred of a Jewish individual, Jewish community, Jewish institutions, the Jewish people, or the state of Israel, simply due to the fact that they are Jewish. Additionally, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA, defines anti-Semitism as a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Or, to paraphrase a Supreme Court ruling on a totally different subject, you know it when you see it. And this is an evil that has always been there. We read just a few weeks ago in our Torah that a new Pharaoh arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. With this new Pharaoh, we see our first case of recorded anti-Semitism, a ruler who chooses not to recognize the attributes of Joseph. This may have been due to a new political regime taking over or to other factors. But this failure to recognize Joseph then extends to the rest of the people when Pharaoh says to his advisors they need to deal wisely with this people that he associates with vermin. So as we can see, the scourge of anti-Semitism goes back as far as the Bible, and it has continued through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Industrialization period, the 20th century, and now the 21st, where we have seen a rise in recent years in anti-Israel sentiment, which is used as a thin veil to disguise the anti-Semitic rhetoric beneath the surface, as well as, in the past weeks, a number of anti-Semitic actions and statements in our country and our own backyard. I have mentioned a number of the incidents that have occurred as of late, but I don't want to go into too much detail about any one of them right now. However, I do want to talk about the ways in which we can respond. The first response must be a personal one. When confronted with anti-Semitism, it is imperative upon each of us as Jews or friends of the Jewish people to stand up and speak out. In just over a week, we will celebrate Rosh Chodesh Adar, the beginning of the Hebrew month of Adar. And in the Talmud, the rabbis teach, Misha nichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. When Adar enters, our joy increases. This is because our happiest holiday, Purim, falls during that month. And as we will read from the Megillah in just a few weeks, Esther remarks that perhaps she was placed in the position of queen to speak up against the evil anti-Semite Haman. Perhaps each of us, on encountering anti-Semitism, is in that place for just that reason, in order to speak out against hatred of Jews, to help educate those around us, and to engage in dialogue and relationship building to lessen the unfounded ideas that the anti-Semite spews. The rabbis teach that even in the days of the Messiah, Purim will still be celebrated, the only holiday to be celebrated. This is because it is a day on which we recall the past hatred and wickedness of that anti-Semite Haman. And we remember that it was incumbent upon Esther, just as it is incumbent on all of us, to speak out. The second response we can have to anti-Semitism is communal. We must speak out as a community when we see communal anti-Semitism. We must also demand individually and collectively that those in power issue proactive, full-throated condemnations of hatred and anti-Semitism. Professor Richard Levy of the University of Illinois in Chicago stated that in Germany during the first part of the 20th century, prior to World War I, neutrality on the part of the government robbed opponents of anti-Semitism of an important source of support. We, today in the 21st century, must demand that our government and our leaders, from the president and vice president, our senators, our congressmen and women, the governor, and everyone in power at a national, state, and local level, do not stand idly by the blood of our neighbors, and do not stand idly by as the scourge festers. To that point, I have to say from this bima, thank you to Governor Kemp and Senator Ossoff for their very clear condemnations of the anti-Semitic incidents in Metro Atlanta last week. But to that point, we must demand further that our leaders here in Georgia and in Washington speak out, investigate criminal activity, and spread love rather than hate. We can also demand immediate action here in our state of Georgia. Currently, there is a bill before the Georgia legislature, HB 30, which will, if passed, formally adopt the International Holocaust Recognition Association definition of anti-Semitism into Georgia law and make it easier to prosecute perpetrators of anti-Semitism. We are currently living in an era where we are witnessing a heightened period of anti-Semitism in the United States. 90% of American Jews believe that anti-Semitism is a problem. And studies show that roughly half of all Americans do not know what anti-Semitism means, and that over 85% of Americans believe at least one anti-Semitic trope. These numbers explain why authorities have had so much trouble enforcing existing laws without that definition. So I'm going to ask and urge each of you to look into this bill. And if you feel as I do, please reach out to your elected officials and tell them you hope that they will support this important step in fighting anti-Semitism. Finally, the third way we can combat anti-Semitism is internally. Pope Francis once taught, if evil is contagious, so is goodness. Let us be infected by goodness, and let us spread goodness. We need to internalize the love that is in the world, not the hate. In the beginning of the book of Genesis, we read that each person was created in the image of God, Bitzal Mo. Rabbi David Ingberg teaches that we can read this word as a construct, B'Tselem Vav, in the image of the Vav. Each of us is created in the image of that letter that means and in Hebrew. For when we can see the Vav in each other, when we respond to the world by seeing each other as an individual capable of connection, we can lessen hatred and indifference because we will lessen the differences between us. When we open our homes, our communities, and most importantly, our hearts to the Vav, to the and, to the other, we will create more love that will permeate and lessen the impact of anti-Semitism. This week, in our Torah, we are at Sinai, reading tomorrow morning the story of Revelation, of receiving Torah on God's mountain. Upon leaving Sinai, the Israelites will be commanded to create a dwelling for the divine along their travels. In the next few weeks, we will read in the Torah that God will command the people, Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham, build for me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. Meaning God may dwell among them, the people, rather than it, the sanctuary. That's the idea. God is not contained in any particular space, but within people and the relationships we have with each other. By opening up to becoming a sanctuary, a vessel for holiness of God to reside, we each may be able to help build a world of chesed, a world of love, built on relationships with our broader communities, where anti-Semitism no longer has a place, no longer has a voice. Until then, we, all of us, must stand up as one community and make sure to raise our voices against this hate and intolerance. Amen.
Olam chesed yibaneh, yaradai, yaradai, dai, dai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yaradai, yaradai, dai, dai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yarada, yarada, dai, dai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yarada, yarada, dai, dai. And I will build this world from love, Yada-da, yada-da-da-da. And you must build this world from love. Yada-da, yada-da-da-da. And if we build this world from love, yada-da, yada-da-da-da. Then God will build this world from love. Yada-da, yada-da-da-da. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yada-da, yada-da-da-da.
We pause now in our service with our hearts opened by those words of hope we just sang. To think of those members of our community who are ill. Some are in the hospital, some are at home recovering, and some have diseases and illnesses from which they may never recover. This week we think especially of Gary Swartz, Sheila Schneiderman, Claudia Tharp, Tom Bradford, Janelle Nichols, Laurel Phoenix, Judy Jacobs, Robert Cohen, Brianna Jacobs, David Sankey, Emily Poisson, Stanley Bissell, Rena Fields, Richard Jacobs, Brooke Jacobs, Caroline Eisenhart, Larry Futterman, Marty Barish, Gary Paul, Brian Berger, Chandler Jacobs, Harriet Jacobs, Yael Bat David Vilea, Bev Mahone, Alan Friedman, Sarah Kahn, Lee Silverstein, Jill Vanteam, Eleanor Goodman, Libby Routman, Marjorie Whitmore, Jerry Phillips, Paul Kirshon, Reva Fisher, Leslie Knight, Bert Singerman, Mateo Velasquez, Max Jacobs, Kathy Waldner, Richard Zuspin, and Christopher Denton. If you are thinking of someone who is in need of a prayer of healing, I invite you to share their name with the community as my eyes meet yours, or if you are joining us online, to add their name at this time to the chat. We think of all of them, all that we have named, and all those we hold in our hearts who are in need of prayer of healing, and ask for God's healing presence to be with them. We also ask God to watch over victims of violence around the world. May they be blessed with healing, hope, and love. We ask for God to watch over those who care for the sick each day. May they be blessed with wisdom, support, strength, care. We ask God to care for all of those who are suffering in Syria and Turkey following the earthquake this past week. We ask for God to be with all of them, all of us. We sing together these words on page 371.
Mi shebeira avotenu mekor abracha leimotenu. May the sources drink who bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
We turn now in our prayer books to page 586 as we rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'tet gedula li'otzeh bereshit, shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed aretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, u'shchinat uzo b'govei meromim, u'Eloheinu einod. V'anachnu kor'im u'mishtachavim u'modim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad. U'shemo echad.
Please be seated. Why should I wish to see God better than this day? I see something of God in each hour of the 24, and each moment then. In the faces of men and women I see God, and in my own face in the glass. I find letters that God dropped in the street, and every one is signed by God's name. And I leave them where they are, for I know that wheresoever I go, others will punctually come, forever and ever. Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. At this sacred moment of our Shabbat evening worship, we think longingly and lovingly of those taken from us, both recently and at this season in years past. We are in a period of Shiva, the first 7 days since his funeral, of Paul Wiener. And we're in a period of Shloshim, the first 30 days since their passing, of Ken Mercado and Elaine Gerber. And we mark the Yartsites, the anniversary of their passing on this Shabbat, of Joan Shaw Friedman, Sally Galler, Eddie Goldberg, Hector Gonzalez, Abram Gordon, Thelma Greenwald, Hilda Z. Harvey, Steve L. Jones, Joseph Aaron Kalin, Louis Ostro, Pam Poplar Tolk, Larry Schuster, Ruth Smilowitz, Rhoda Sokol, George R. Winton, Herman Wolf, and Gail Talent. If you are remembering someone on this Shabbat, I invite you to share their name with the community as my eyes meet yours, or to add their name at this time to the chat. Zichronam livracha. May all their memories be a blessing. And may we take the memories of all those we have named and all those we love and connect them to both the millions of our people who have no one to say Kaddish for them, and also the many, many thousands who have died as a result of the earthquake, as we rise together as one community, speaking these words of faith that are found on page 598, the words of the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei techol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'imromav, huya asei shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, and comfort to all the bereaved here and everywhere with the blessing of peace. Together we all say, Amen.
Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru amen.
Our closing song can be found on page 625. Please join us in Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'teref Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, B'tifara, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, B'tifara. Ve'hu echad, v'ein sheni, le'amshilo, le'achbira, ve'li reishit, ve'li tachlit, ve'lo ha'oz, ve'ha'misra, ve'hu eli, ve'chai go'ali, ve'tzor chavi, v'yetzara, ve'hu nisi, umanos li, menat kosi, v'yomekra. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, B'tifara, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, B'tifara. V'yado Akid Ruchi, V'eit Ishan Me'a'ira, V'im Ruchi Keviati, Adonai li, V'lo ira. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'eit Nasa B'chefta Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, V'achari Kiklot HaKol, Leva'ado Yimlok Torah, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, B'tifara, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Oveh, B'tifara.
Please be seated. Good Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbos.
It was a pleasure being able to worship with each and every one of you this evening, as well as everyone joining us virtually. Just a few brief announcements before you are all invited to join us following our Kiddush and Motzi and closing benediction for an Oneg Shabbat, so we can continue celebrating Shabbat, and also in honor of our 8 B'nai Mitzvah students for tomorrow morning. Our first announcement is that tomorrow morning during our 10:30 a.m. Shabbat morning worship service, our 8 adult B'nai Mitzvah will lead us in prayer will share their words of Torah, will teach us and be our service leaders, as well as be called to the Torah and read from it for the first time. And we will celebrate a couple years after their 13th birthday, their adult B'nai Mitzvah. It's followed by a Kiddush luncheon immediately following the service. On Sunday, we have religious school for our pre-K through 8th grade students at 9 o'clock. And on Monday, just a note, there is no Mahjong on Monday this week, but our Sisterhood Book Club will meet on Zoom at 7:30 p.m.
Is that because it's the day after the Super Bowl, the most
No.
widely taken off day? It's not Mahjong?
No. So Wednesday, Wednesday we have Tanakh study at 11 o'clock in the morning. Join us as we continue studying the book of Judges. It's a great conversation each and every week. Our group keeps growing, and it's a lot of fun every week to study together. At noon on Wednesday, right after Tanakh study, you can make some sandwiches with the Sandwich Project in the kitchen to do a wonderful mitzvah to help feed the hungry. At 6 o'clock, our prime timers are getting together at Brimstone Restaurant and Tavern for trivia night. If you have questions, contact Janet Levy. And our February board meeting is also that evening. On Thursday at 1 o'clock, our Knitting and Crochet group will meet on Zoom. Mahjong will meet Thursday night, as well as our Men's Club Poker group. Then next Friday is a very important Friday to note because we're trying something new here in 2023 that once a month we are going to have our Kabbalat Panim, read that as Oneg Shabbat before the service, at 5:45 with services starting at 6:15. And that's going to start next Friday night. So next Friday, don't come at 7:30. Come at 5:45 for a Nash, and then stay for services at 6:15. And the Nash next week, the Kabbalat Panim, is going to be, I'm told, just phenomenally delicious. Sponsored by George and Kathy Waldner. And George has told me that not only is he sponsoring it, but he's also cooking for it. So George, we're going to thank you ahead of time, but can't wait for next Friday night to try all the food and join together for services early next Friday. Just a reminder also that next weekend, on the 19th, there is no religious school in observance of President's Day weekend, and our office will be closed then on Monday. A very special thank you this week to Lori Bradford, Vicki Levine, and Susan Goldman for their ongoing time and support with our in-house Mahjong group. We love having them here twice a week at CDT. I promise one of these times, ladies, I will come and learn how to play, but not yet.
Rabbi, I feel like you missed an announcement. It's been going like B'nai Mitzvah class this Thursday. Is that?
We're done tomorrow. Yes.
Oh.
So, I know. I've been having the same announcement for the last 11 months, but it was yes. So Eric, you can go to Men's Club now. But we will conclude our service this evening with Kiddush and Motzi. Each week, I invite our young people who have not yet celebrated becoming a bar or bat mitzvah to come help lead in Kiddush and Motzi. And I'm going to do that tonight. So our young people who haven't yet celebrated becoming bar or bat mitzvah. But I'm also going to invite our B'nai Mitzvah students who will celebrate tomorrow morning as well to join us on the Bima for Kiddush and Motzi as we all turn to page 123 and we rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei peri hagafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu Shabbat kodsho v'yava u'ratzon inchilanu Zikaron le'maaseh b'reishit Ki hu yom techila le'mikra'ei kodesh Zecher ביציאת מצרים. קיוונו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים. בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
And Talia and Mike and Ella can show them how to do it.
Motzi lechem min haaretz, we give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Motzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avot.
And as they have the first piece on behalf of all of us, we ask for God's the ones who are gluten-free got the biggest pieces. But we ask for God's blessing. Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'yakol b'nei adam b'shalom. May God give strength to God's people, and may God bless all of us, all Israel and all creation with the blessings of peace. Together we all say, Amen.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.